Jesse McGraw had been farming the same rugged patch of land in western Iowa for 37 years. It wasn't glamorous, far from it, but it was honest work. In that time, Jesse had tilled every inch of soil with his own 2 hands, raised cattle through bitter winters, and harvested fields under scorching summer suns. His hands bore the marks of a lifetime of labor, thick calluses, sun-worn skin, and the kind of grip that told you he'd never back down from a day's work. Corn, cattle, wheat, that was the rhythm of his life. And while the world outside his farm had kept changing, Jesse had always kept things simple. He wasn't interested in social media, didn't care for fashion trends, and only owned one suit, the one he wore to his daughter's wedding. Politics. That had always been noise playing faintly in the background of his long days. Until one day, the noise got louder and personal. Suddenly, government policies started digging into his crops. Milk prices swung like a wrecking ball. Taxes ticked higher. Equipment costs rose. And every month, fuel and feed dug deeper into his earnings. Workers were harder to find. Weather insurance was a joke. Bureaucracy was strangling the very soil he held sacred. That's when Jesse started paying attention. So when he heard that former President Donald Trump would be visiting rural Iowa as part of a campaign listening tour, Jesse didn't rush to print a sign or polish his boots. Instead, he picked up the phone and called the organizers. "I've got land," he said. "And I've got questions." The request confused the team. "So, you're not a supporter?" Jesse chuckled. "I'm not interested in bumper stickers. I'm interested in straight answers." And surprisingly, the organizers agreed. The visit was arranged. A quiet corner of Jesse's farm would serve as a backdrop for a 15-minute PR stop. But Jesse wasn't preparing for a photo op. He wasn't rehearsing commentary or worrying about what cameras might catch. What he was preparing was a question. One that had been sitting on his chest for years. A question he was ready to ask face to face, not as a protest, but as a man who fed the country and wanted to know if the country still noticed. Trump arrived expecting the usual drill: handshakes, smiles, applause, maybe a few words exchanged before the cameras snapped a dozen photos and the convoy rolled on. But Jesse gave him none of that. No handshake, no flattery, no staged small talk. Just a steady gaze and a voice that cut through the buzz of media crews and local officials. They stood face to face amid Iowa's golden fields, curious cattle grazing lazily in the background. The sky was clear, but tension hung thick as a thundercloud. "You've shaken a lot of hands," Jesse began, arms crossed. "But have you ever stood in a grocery line wondering if ground beef was too expensive today?" Trump's eyes narrowed slightly, caught off guard. "I've helped farmers more than any administration," he shot back. "Tax cuts, trade deals, deregulation. You know the numbers." "But I know the reality," Jesse countered instantly. "Costs are up. Feed, fuel, fertilizer, they're eating us alive. Every week I watch another neighbor sell off equipment or give up the land that fed 3 generations." Trump, now fully focused, stepped forward. "We brought back industry. We renegotiated terrible trade deals." "And it's not enough," Jesse said, voice rising just loud enough to quiet the surrounding chatter. "Because once the headlines go away, we're still here, scraping by while you talk about winning. What happens to us after the cameras leave?" Behind them, staffers shifted nervously. Aides whispered. Security watched closely as microphones caught every single word. The moment looked primed to spin into disaster. Media gold for headlines like "Farmer Grills Trump in Viral Clash." But instead of escalating, Trump paused. Really paused. Not a politician's silence, but the kind that happens when someone realizes they weren't just challenged, they were seen, stripped of talking points. For 5 full seconds, he said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, his posture softened. He glanced at the open field behind Jesse, then back at the man himself. "All right," Trump finally said, with no cameras flashing. "Show me." Jesse blinked. "What?" "No press. No crew. Just you and me. Show me the real farm life that you're living." And just like that, the standoff became something else. A challenge was met, not with argument, but with curiosity. And everything began to shift. Instead of walking away, shifting blame, or launching into another speech, Trump surprised everyone, especially Jesse. He stayed silent. 5 full seconds of silence. No cameras. No rehearsed lines. Just the weight of a moment that demanded something real. Then he spoke. "Show me." Jesse raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." "If what you're saying is true, then show me," Trump repeated, this time more seriously. "Walk me through it. No press. No stage. Just us." Behind them, members of the media began to stir, unsure of what to do. Trump motioned to aides. "Cut the cameras." To everyone's surprise, they did. The reporters and production crew were told to remain near the entrance. What started as a public showcase had turned into a private tour. Over the next hour, Jesse did something he never expected. He gave a former president a boots-on-the-ground look at the hard truths of rural America. They walked through the barn first, dirt floors packed down, stacks of hay thinned from a tight winter. Jesse pointed out aging trusses, cracked roof panels, and the patchwork he rigged together just to keep water out. Then the feedlot. Cattle that needed more grain than he could afford to buy. "You subsidize big producers," Jesse explained, "but guys like me, we're invisible until election season." Trump said little, but his eyes scanned everything, taking mental notes. They passed the grain silos next, half full. Jesse explained how market shifts left him holding product longer than usual, messing with his margins. Then onto a shed where an old combine sat with parts he couldn't afford to replace. The local repair shop had closed last year. The mechanics went to work in the city. "You want to know what's broken?" Jesse said, gently kicking an empty feed bag. "It's not just the barn door. It's the system holding all of this together." Trump nodded slowly, brow furrowed, not in anger, but reflection. "No one talks to me like this," he admitted. "Not like this." By the time they returned to the road, T-shirts damp with sweat and boots caked in dust, the tension had faded. The argument was forgotten. What remained was a handshake, not for a photo, not for a crowd, but for a shared understanding. Just two men, once divided, standing eye to eye, no longer speaking at each other, but truly hearing one another. What began as a tense moment between a seasoned farmer and a former president evolved into something much more, a ripple that reached far beyond the dusty fields of Iowa. Within days, word of the private walk spread, not through tabloid headlines or viral videos, but from leaked staff memos and off-the-record comments passed between reporters. This wasn't a carefully curated campaign stunt. It was real, raw, and for once, unscripted. Later that week, clips began surfacing, not flashy soundbites, but fragments of closed-door meetings Trump had with his advisors, referencing Jesse McGraw by name. His tone in those discussions wasn't defensive, it was contemplative. He spoke about rising equipment costs and small-town struggles. He mentioned empty barns, overpriced feed, and the kids farmers wish they could afford to keep on the land. And then came a moment that truly caught national attention. During Trump's next rally, in front of thousands, he said, "I met a man named Jesse McGraw in Iowa. He's not a millionaire, not a politician, just a hard-working farmer trying to hold on. He said things no one in D.C. ever tells you. Things I had to see to understand. That's got to change, and fast." The crowd roared, but the message hit deeper than cheers. Because for once, it wasn't about a party or a poll. It was about a person. The media called it Jesse's impact. Articles popped up nationwide. A CNN anchor called it an example of how politics could still be personal. Farmers from Minnesota to Missouri began writing in. Some supported Trump, others had deep disagreements with him. But nearly all of them echoed the same thing. At least he listened. Emails flooded the McGraw inbox. Local newspapers asked Jesse for interviews. A book agent even reached out. But Jesse, he didn't chase the spotlight. He went back to his usual rhythm, feeding cattle, keeping equipment running with elbow grease, and fixing fences before the next storm. The cameras were gone, but the impact lingered. Because his story had made it into rooms he never expected. Policy rooms. Strategy rooms. Rooms where voices like his were usually missing. Jesse hadn't set out to be loud. He'd just told the truth. And sometimes, in this world of noise, That's what echoes the longest. Weeks after the unplanned, unforgettable encounter on his farm, Jesse McGraw received a plain envelope in his mailbox. No dramatic courier, no spotlight. Just a simple stamp and a return address marked Office of Donald J. Trump. Inside, he found a typed letterhead and a short handwritten note in bold blue ink. The handwriting was strong, almost hurried, but unmistakably personal. For a man who tells it like it is, thank you for showing me the real story, not the one on paper. I won't forget it. Donald J. Trump. Beneath the note was something even more surprising, an early policy draft. A proposal outlining new funding initiatives for small acreage farmers, rural mental health programs, and grants designed specifically to aid local food producers. It wasn't just empty talk, it included direct language pulled from the issues Jesse had raised on their walk: equipment depreciation, climate unpredictability, and generational debt burdens that choke modern family farms. No promises, no signatures yet, but a tangible first step. It was clear Jesse's words hadn't just been heard. They had stuck. Of course, this wasn't a headline-grabbing miracle. Crops didn't suddenly flourish. Markets didn't reset overnight. But something else had shifted, something harder to measure, yet deeply felt. For Jesse, the letter was proof that ordinary voices could still break through the noise. He didn't own a suit. He didn't have a campaign fund. He didn't speak at rallies or post politics online. But he knew what fuel costs. He knew what rain delays meant. He knew what it felt like to lose sleep over tractors and tuition bills. And somehow, just by asking one honest question, he had planted a seed somewhere far beyond his cornfields, one that might grow to help others like him across the country. Jesse didn't frame the letter. He didn't show it off to the neighbors. He tucked it into an old photo album, next to Polaroids of his father on the same land. Because for him, it wasn't about fame. It was about being acknowledged. Jesse didn't raise his voice. He raised a question, quietly, truthfully, and without an agenda. And in a world oversaturated with opinions, noise, and filters, that simple question did the most unexpected thing of all. It got someone to truly listen.